That day, I just carried a tray full of coffee through the crowded restaurant as usual. But fate played a cruel joke. Be careful, the coffee poured from my hands and splashed on a man's expensive suit. I looked up, my heart almost stopped beating. He stood there, his black tailored suit framing a cold figure, his deep gray eyes flashing with a dangerous chill. Alexander Knight, the most terrifying man in New York business. A man who can decide the fate of countless people with just a slight lift of his hand. Do you know how much this suit costs? His voice was as cold as an ice blade. I thought that day was just the worst accident of my life. Unexpectedly, it became the beginning of my entry into another world. 3 days later, I received an unfamiliar phone call. Emma Carter, you have been accepted as an internship assistant at the Knight Group. You will report at 9 o'clock tomorrow. I was stunned. The Knight Group? That is the financial empire that all New Yorkers dream of entering, and how could I, a poor student who can't even pay the tuition, get this opportunity? When I walked into the glass skyscraper with nervousness, I realized what hell on earth is called. She is the little waiter serving the coffee? My God, the CEO of Knight is too casual, and he actually stuffed her into the company. Hee. Maybe there is some unknown relationship. The whispers were accompanied by mocking eyes, and I felt like a monster under a microscope. And he, Alexander Knight, sat at the end of the conference table, with a cold face without a trace of emotion. When everyone mocked me, he just raised his eyes and said indifferently, "Since I arranged for her, she will stay." At that moment, my heart welled up with mixed emotions. Grateful, fear, or an inexplicable sense of oppression? But his next sentence pierced my dignity like a sharp blade. "But remember, Carter, if you make another mistake, I won't show mercy." I lowered my head, clenched my fists, my nails almost pierced into my palms. I don't think I've ever been more soberly aware. I'm just a tiny pawn in his world. The internship life at the Knight Group is more brutal than I imagined. Every morning, I arrive at the company earlier than others, organize the meeting materials, and serve the coffee at their prescribed temperature. But no matter how hard I try, I can still hear the sneer behind me. Poor girls really think they can climb high branches? Stop teasing. The CEO will get tired of it sooner or later. Their words pierced my heart like needles. But I can only grit my teeth and pretend not to hear. And he, Alexander Knight, the president, is as cold as an iceberg, but from time to time he stares at me with those deep eyes. I always feel that he sees through everything about me. Once, working late at night, I was the only one left in the office, struggling to move a thick stack of files. Suddenly, a tall figure appeared under the light. "When are you going to move alone?" His deep voice sounded behind me. I was so scared that I almost dropped the file on the ground. "CEO, I can do it, don't bother you." He reached out and easily picked up the file I couldn't hold and placed it on the table. At that moment, I realized that his hands were clearly articulated, and the ice was cold and powerful. My heart suddenly lost control. Why do I panic at this distance? "Carter, you are very stubborn." He stared at me, his tone cold, but with a hint of inexplicable. But in this company, stubbornness is not always an advantage. After speaking, he turned to leave, leaving me frozen and confused. From that day on, I was even more afraid to be alone with him. But he began to appear frequently in my work area. During meetings, his eyes always stayed on me for a moment. In the corridor, his steps always overlapped with mine. I told myself that it was just an illusion. However, every time I looked at each other, that forbidden attraction, like a flame, gradually consumed my reason. The Knight Group's year-end reception was the most tense day of my internship. The hall was resplendent, and the crystal chandeliers shone with dazzling light. The executives in gowns held champagne and laughed one after another. As for me, I was just a small intern who was temporarily arranged to serve wine and organize materials. Standing among them, I seemed out of place, and even a little embarrassed. I tried my best to reduce my presence, but I still heard a few sarcastic voices. I heard that she is the poor girl, to be able to be left by the president himself. What a shady means, right? My face was burning red, and the tray in my hand was almost unstable. Just as I was about to escape, a low and cold voice suddenly sounded. "She is an intern I personally selected. Is there a problem?" I suddenly looked up. It was him, Alexander. He stood not far away. His eyes swept coldly over the snickering female colleagues, and his aura was so strong that they were instantly silenced. I was stunned. My heart was so chaotic that I couldn't breathe. Alexander walked over to me, took the tray in my hand, and whispered, "Raise your head, Carter. Don't let them see your weakness. His voice was like an order, but also like a silent protection. I could only nod stiffly, but I didn't dare to look at him directly. After the reception, I hid in a corner of the garden alone, trying to calm myself. Unexpectedly, he followed. "What are you thinking?" He stood behind me, his tone not allowing me to perfunctory. I bit my lip and hesitated for a while before whispering, "I don't want everyone to misunderstand our relationship." The air was still for a few seconds. Suddenly, he took a step closer and his voice was so low that it was almost close to my ear. "Then, what should be the relationship between us?" My mind went blank. His words were tentative, ambiguous, but dangerous. "CEO." I took a step back in a panic, but my heel tripped and I almost fell. Just when I thought I was going to fall, a strong arm wrapped around me. His breath came to my face, and his low voice had a dangerous smile. "Be careful, Carter. I don't want you to get hurt." My heart is completely messed up. I know that going forward with this step is an abyss that cannot be turned back, but my body has fallen faster than my reason. After the drinks party that night, I hardly slept a wink. Alexander's words, "So, what should be the relationship between us?" echoed in my ears like a curse. I should have drawn the line immediately, but my heart kept remembering the heat and danger in his eyes. It was a sense-ripping feeling that took my breath away. The next morning, when I looked in the mirror, my eyes were black. I warned myself, "Emma, you can't get stuck. You are just an intern, and he's the head of the night group." But the more I tried to forget, the more I remembered the smell of his embrace last night. A few days later, I was assigned to prepare materials for the senior management. When I hurried into the conference room, I found the last empty seat. It was right next to Alexander. I was stunned for 2 seconds, but his eyes swept over me. Those deep eyes seemed to be waiting for me. "Sit down." It was just as simple to words, but with an irresistible majesty. I sat down cautiously, my heart was in chaos. During the whole meeting, he occasionally whispered to me to turn the pages and record. Every time, his voice was close to my ear, and every time, it made me breathe faster. And when others spoke, he even inadvertently put his arms on the back of the chair and half-circled me in. The seemingly random movement made my heart almost explode. I tried to keep myself calm, but my palms were already full of cold sweat. At the end of the meeting, he suddenly called me, "Come with me." Before I could react, he had walked straight to the private elevator that was only for high-level use. I hurriedly followed, my heart pounding. The moment the elevator doors closed, only the two of us were left in the entire space. I took a step back subconsciously, but was locked by his sharp eyes. "Carter, you've been avoiding me." His voice was low, with a pressing question. I shook my head in a panic. "No, I just..." Before he finished speaking, he suddenly approached, his palm on top of my head, as if completely blocking my retreat. "Don't lie." At that moment, I could almost hear my own heartbeat. The air was burning hot, as if I would lose my mind in the next second. I bit my lip, trying to keep my voice calm. "President, our identities are different. You are the head of the night group, and I am just an intern." He stared at me and suddenly laughed softly. "So, identity can determine feelings?" My mind was in chaos. I wanted to push him away, but I found my hands frozen in midair, with no strength at all. When the elevator reached the top floor, he suddenly reached out and pressed the pause button. The whole space was frozen for a moment, only breathing intertwined. "Emma." He called my name for the first time, no longer the cold Carter. "I want to know. What are you afraid of?" I was speechless. "What are you afraid of?" "Afraid of being discovered and being the target of gossip. Afraid that I would really fall and be unable to extricate myself. But the most terrifying thing is I am afraid that I am already falling." I finally can't help but whisper, "We can't do this." He suddenly leaned over, his eyes burning. "Can't? Or are you afraid to admit that you already have me in your heart?" My breathing stopped. The air in the elevator seemed to be burning. At that moment, I was almost completely defeated. If he got any closer, I might lose all my sanity. At this moment, footsteps suddenly came from outside the elevator. He smiled lightly, pressed the button, and the elevator resumed operation. When the door opened, he had taken back all the dangerous breath and put on a cold and alienated mask again. What others saw was still the flawless CEO, and I was already in a mess. That night, I was lying on the bed in the dormitory, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. The screen of my phone suddenly lit up, and it was a text message from an unfamiliar number. "If you approach him again, just Just wait and see how you destroy yourself. My whole body shook, and my heart tightened suddenly. Who was it? Those jealous female colleagues? Or Isabella, the rumored fiancée of Alexander? I clenched my phone tightly, my fingers trembled, and almost at the same time, another text message jumped in. It was him. Alexander, can't sleep? I stared at the screen, confused. Two very different messages, like the hands of fate, pushed me into a completely different abyss.